Well, hello, everyone. It's John Lockland here. I'm the director of FVD International, Forum for Democracy International. Welcome to this week's forum. We're delighted to be joined this week from West Virginia by Cyan Quinn of the White Papers Policy Institute, whose extraordinary speech at the Remigration Summit in May in Milan earlier this year attracted the attention of several people who went there from FVD. Cyan, you gave a wonderful talk, and we can see the first slide of your presentation on the screen. Migration, immigration, these have been on the political agenda now for decades, albeit not to much effect in most European countries anyway. But remigration is a relatively new idea, and you're one of the standard bearers of it. As it happens, it's in the party manifesto of FVD for the elections at the end of October. Tell us how you got interested in this, Cyan, and then perhaps we can dive into your presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a real treat. It was a delight to be able to present in Milan back in May and to meet several of the members of the Forum for Democracy, along with many other political parties that also are looking to include now remigration in their platforms. This is the topic of the day. You're absolutely right that immigration, migration has been in the news, has been happening for the last rapid rate over the last 30 years, or in the US, 60 years at least. And now that we've seen this migration, this wave of migration, we are proposing the opposite of that, so remigration. If they came here legally, gradually, and peacefully over the last 30 to 60 years, they can also go back legally, peacefully, and actually in many cases, we're seeing that they're going back voluntarily. So this is really exciting news for us. And I think that any political party that makes this a part of their platform is going to have electoral success, because this is what the people want. So I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
So one of the things that you, I believe, talked about in your presentation, which we're going to see again now, is the myths surrounding migration, surrounding immigration, and this is a very important point. I actually gave a long interview to our usual co-host, who unfortunately is not with us today, Jeremy Nell, on the issue of migration, and I made the point very insistently that, of course, there is obviously an economic factor from the point of view of the immigrants themselves who come to work, maybe in proper jobs, maybe also in organized crime. But I also said that migration was driven by ideology, by a political program, which is known, by the way, in French as immigrationism, migrationism, if you like. And I think that's what you destroy in your myths, Cyan. Is that right?
That's right. So we were asked to give this presentation on the economics of migration and remigration. There are several myths out there that we hear. Immigration is good for the economy. We need to bring in migrants. They'll do the jobs that Americans, or in your case, the Dutch won't do, and we need them. And so that's probably the most common argument that we hear, besides from the humanitarian angle, which is that all people are equal, people are interchangeable, that there's this concept in liberalism and progressive liberalism that people are simply economic units and they can be exchanged across borders without any problems. We know that that's not the case. And there are both the social consequences of that, which many other presenters covered, and just the disaster that we see as multiculturalism, but there are also the economic problems that come along with that. So I'll get into it here right now.
Let's dive in, because your first myth, if I remember correctly, is that immigration increases GDP, gross domestic product.
That's right. That's right. And just to recap about who we are for a minute, you know, and it's not just me, just a West Virginian saying these things. I'm in West Virginia, close enough to DC to be effective, but far enough away to avoid the swamp. But it's not just, I'm US based, and I have a background in political philosophy, biology and lobbying, but my partners are actually international. So we have one who has a master's degree in political economy and foreign relations. Our managing editor is a journalist who's written about the national question and immigration for the last 20 years. So, and we have people from the US, Canada, we have someone in the Netherlands, of course, Sweden, and a handful of other countries too. And because we recognize that migration and the issue of remigration is a problem for the West as a whole. It's been inflicted upon us through ideology and the political class without the consent of the people over the last 60 years. And therefore, we need a collective response as the West. This is not just an individual country issue. We have the UN Migration Pact. We can also have the UN Remigration Pact. So this quote here, actually, we can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies. That was our former representative, Iowa Representative Steve King. He tweeted this in support of Dutch politician Geert Wilders in 2017, I think it was. So, there's international support for this idea. Now, he got in trouble for that, but he's saying something that is that everybody feels and knows on the inside, but there's some reaction like, oh, you can't say that because our societies are so committed to this idea of
well, if I could just interject real quickly, as you know, I live in Russia. That quote is common sense in Russia. That's common sense.
Yeah, but I think the problem is, apart from the, I suppose they reacted against the supposed racism of the word somebody else's babies, but the idea that the pro-migration people want to restore civilization is obviously the problem. They don't want to restore it. They probably want to destroy it. They certainly don't care about it, and they probably actively want to destroy it. Anyway, that's my view of that quotation. Go ahead, Cyan.
Sorry for the interjection. Please keep going.
Oh no, please interject as much as you want. I really enjoy the conversation, and you're right. There may be an element of wanting to destroy it. We simply hear things like all white people are evil, or Western civilization is evil because it's dominated these other cultures. Whereas it's actually naturally we live in a world with many different cultures and different types of civilizations, and it's just a matter of politics and how the world works, that you will have civilizations.
It's the race issue that is always played there, right there. It should be framed, and I'm sure this is what we're going to learn from you. It should be framed in civilizational terms. In Russia, it's determined that it's not about race. It's about Russian civilization and culture. It never gets down. See, this is this very toxic Western export to the world that everything is racialized. Okay. And it's not. It's not around the world. It is a cudgel that is used by the West to export its liberalism, to destroy its own civilization. That's the end of my speech, and I'm going to listen for the rest of the hour.
No, that's okay. No, you touch on something that's important, though. People freak out about race and ethnicity. I heard this recently on, I was listening to Trigonometry, and they brought up the idea of multicultural society and a multi-ethnic society. And I thought that was interesting. They said, well, there's a multicultural society, and we know that doesn't work. And that's when you fit in many different cultures, religions, ways of life under the same nation. So there isn't good faith in the political process. And then there's a multi-ethnic society where there are simply different ethnicities that are living in the same country. And we shouldn't have a problem with that. Now, as I said earlier, I have a background in biology as well, that we know that biology affects culture. Where does culture come from? Where does your civilization come from? It comes from who you are. And there's a big part of that's genetic, and that's not bad. And that's not racist to say that either, that different peoples create different civilizations. So, we tackle demographic issues for that very reason, because we understand that if you lose the demographic that created your nation or that political expression that became a nation, then you will lose your way of life because they are interconnected. So, they'll say cultural versus ethnic, and I don't acknowledge the difference there.
What
I
explains
accept it.
What explains Han, what people call China today, Chinese Han culture and civilization, Russian culture and civilization, Persian culture and civilization? This is backing up your point. That is something that is never mentioned at all. I mean, and those were all different civilizations. Why? Because the people were different. It's not hard to understand.
Oh, and it's not bad either, So I think, and it's perfectly natural if you grow up in Western civilization to say, yes, I love it. I want it to continue. And I love the people who created it. So let's preserve them. So that's what we focus on. And in this case, we're going to discuss the myths that surround immigration. So, because this is the number one threat to our civilization and to our political processes and to the demographics is immigration. Import more people, they have more babies, soon they're going to outnumber you. So we don't want that to happen. The primary arguments are economic, so we're going to go ahead and dismantle those right now. Myth number one, immigration increases the GDP. All hail the GDP. The conclusion is this is a half-truth. So immigration can increase the GDP, but that growth is consumed by either the immigrants themselves through social services and whatnot, or it's redistributed to the top wealthiest percentile. We know this.
Well, it's almost a truism. It's almost a truism because if you have more people, then you will have a bigger GDP because those people will.
You hope so, at least. You hope so, at least.
No, but I mean, even if they're just living off the state, they will go to the shops and buy things. And when they go to the supermarket and buy food, that counts as an economic transaction and therefore goes into the GDP figures.
Perfect. Exactly. So it's more people, there's more economy going. Now, is that an economy that we want? Are people able to, does that directly correlate with quality of life? No, it does not.
Exactly.
Not necessarily. So going into here, I want to spend a little bit of time with this graph. This was put together by Harvard economist Roland Fryer over at aneconomicsense.org. And what he did was he compared the GDP per capita with the real median weekly earnings of the full-time workers. And what you can see is that there's even as the GDP is going up, after a period of mass immigration it really started in 1965 for us, but this graph starts at 1980. You can see the GDP is going up. Okay, that's great, but the real median weekly earnings are stagnant.
That is very interesting graph. Yeah, go on.
The reason for that is because we have a benefit. So because of the depression of wages of the native born, you have people who come in, they're willing to do jobs for less, right? Now that profit counts towards an increase in the GDP. So we can see this. There's a 2017 report by the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and they stated the benefit of immigration to the native born could be $54.2 billion a year. That sounds great, right? Everybody wants that. But what is that benefit? That benefit is the reduction in wages annually to workers and then the gain to businesses, which results in a net benefit. And we discovered that immigrants drove down the wages of native workers by $244.93 billion. Wow. So this is the figure. You can put a figure on it, the race to the bottom for the lowest wages. Now,
just to dwell on that, that means my earlier remark about GDP may have seemed a bit facetious because I was talking about total GDP, but what you're showing there in that previous graph, Cyan, is that per capita GDP does rise, but that per capita GDP does not mean that people are getting better off.
That's exactly correct. And you can see here, well, who is consuming that per capita GDP? We can see that between 1945, again, this was put together by Roland Fryer, and 2010, the real incomes of the lower working class Americans dropped by 6%. In that same time frame, the top 1% of earners increased by 312%, and the top 0.01 ballooned by 431%. So, you know, in in crude Marxist terms, this is a shift, resource shift in wealth from labor to capital. So it's either not creating jobs, or when it does, it creates more poverty wage jobs. That's not something that we want. Here again, here's a combination of three graphs put together. We're comparing the first graph of the GDP with median weekly earnings, the income distribution, and we're comparing that to the total foreign-born population from 1960 to 2013. It's about the same time period. You can see there is a massive shift upwards. But people's lives aren't getting better. This is a woman in Beed, India. They earn $3 a day, so they would be, of course, delighted to come to the United States to work. Of course, we want living wages for everyone. We believe in human dignity, but that's a value that we have in Western civilization. To preserve that value and to preserve that way of life, we need to be able to preserve those jobs as well. We don't want to live in a society like Beed, India. 1 in 5 women they've had their uterus removed in order to boost productivity. So one of the topics that came up at the conference, and one of the things that we talk about at White Papers, is as pronatalist policy. So women in Western civilization are struggling right now because we're expected to have 2-income households in order to run a family. And it's very difficult to raise children and hold down a full-time job. There are very few part-time jobs that are reserved for women with flexible schedules to be able to fulfill their parenting duties. Well, it can get worse. You could also have your uterus removed so that you can earn your $3 a day. We don't want to live in that society. And lastly, immigration is actually not necessary to raise the GDP. Other countries have done this differently before. There is the Japanese economic miracle, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Right now, it stands at 97.8% Japanese in 2024, and has averaged 1.2% economic growth for the last 20 years. The Japanese economic miracle, I'm sure you're aware of, between the post-war Japan is about 1955 up until the oil crisis of 1973. They had phenomenal economic growth. And this was driven largely in part by innovation. That's something that we're seeing in our Western nations right now with AI, the development of AI, and also robotics to make manual labor jobs easier. There are a lot of things that we can invest in that are not bringing in poverty wage level jobs. Other examples, of course, Poland is 98.5% Polish as of 2021, averaged 3.94 economic growth since 1995. And Sweden averaged 2% growth between 1969 and 1980, when it was the most ethnically cohesive country in the world. So we don't need it. We can rely on innovation instead. Myth number 2. So that leads into myth number 2. Employers want to be able to hire native workers. The crops will rot in the fields. This conclusion here is false. So native workers actually still make up the bulk of jobs in construction and agriculture, and unemployment of foreign nationals is swept under the rug. So for the people who come in on work visas, these people are also bringing in their families, many of whom are not employed. And they also take up social services, and they require translators in our schools and housing assistance. I think you guys have one of the worst housing crises in the world right now in the Netherlands. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to a meeting, I think this was April of last year with your youth organization, and I met a woman who was running for city council, and she said that in the Netherlands, she was on a waiting list for 9 years to get into social housing, whereas refugees can just come in and immediately qualify. I found that to be just
Well,
awful.
this
Is
is
that true?
currently causing a whole wave of protests in Britain, where I'm obviously from. You may know about this, Cyan. The numbers of people arriving in Britain is absolutely gigantic. We're talking at levels of over 1 million a year, and many thousands, many hundreds arrive every day illegally. We have typically between 500 and 1,000 illegal arrivals every day. When I say illegal, I'm talking about the people coming across the channel in dinghies. That's running at a very, very high level as well, even though, of course, it's nothing in comparison to the 1 million or so legal immigrants. But the ones who arrive illegally are then processed by the asylum system, and of course they get put up in hotels. The government typically takes over a hotel, pays the hotel owner a fortune, and the hotel becomes is entirely turned over to asylum seekers. And in Britain, as in other countries, I live in France, to add another perspective, but in Britain, there's almost nowhere in Britain where housing is cheap. In fact, I would say there is nowhere in Britain. It's much like, in that sense, much like the Netherlands, unlike in France, where there are many parts of the country where housing is very cheap. And of course, people are very angry because they can hardly afford a flat themselves. And instead, the flats are given to these migrants. And indeed, all across, again, Britain, France, probably it's the same in Germany, the state imposes, it's so incredible. I still, even after 20 years, find it impossible to believe. But for the last couple of decades, it's true in London, it's true in Paris, it's true in many big British and European cities. When you build a new development, a new housing development, you have to give half of the flats to the local authority for social housing. It's literally incredible. In fact, in Paris, they're starting to impose this rule for office buildings because fewer and fewer people work in the office now because of working, in front of your computer instead at home. And so they're basically taking over office blocks and putting social housing in there. So, of course,
and John, that's all supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's been the case in London for at least 20 years. I remember when I still lived in London, it was I think 40 or 50% of all developments have to go to social housing. So there is a similar rule in Paris, and I think it's probably true of the big cities all over Europe. It's literally crazy. And of course, the hotel thing in Britain now recently, the hotel thing has attracted people because it's a focal point. But in fact, the problem is much bigger. Because typically, of course, the social housing goes to people, John, who are not going to go back. Yeah.
Do you think I could take advantage of these programs?
Well, indeed, they are, as far as I know, very largely given to immigrants, whether legal or illegal.
Well, I would be an immigrant. I'd be an immigrant.
Yeah, but I think you know by your question what the answer is. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Cyan. Yeah.
No, you bring up a very good point. Social housing is meant to be for the people who live there, for the native population, and actually, it's still pretty. The social housing population in certain areas of the Netherlands are still pretty good, and they.
I think the problem is slightly less bad in the Netherlands than it is in Britain and France. Yes.
Right. And in the United States, it's definitely, if you have we call it Section 8. If you have Section 8 housing, that's really bad. You want to stay away from it. And it just devalues the properties around it. So there's still a little hope in some areas over there. But Yeah, no, I think a 9-year waiting list
But these
is
are interesting figures you've got up now on the construction industry, and you mentioned agriculture in your earlier slide. That's an interesting point. And you've put the Netherlands there, 84%. Yes, I think it probably is quite high in the Netherlands. I've no idea what the percentage would be in France. I suspect a lot lower, but I don't have any figures. Anyway, go ahead, Cyan.
This picture is actually from France. This is the reconstruction of Notre Dame. So,
Right.
and you can see that the majority of workers are
Yeah.
of native extraction. And so I thought that was really delightful. I really enjoy these pictures. But you're right. Yes. So the majority of construction workers in Maine are still ethnically white. And then it's really in Germany. They make up 60% of construction, transport, and engineers. The only industry that is dominated by migrants in Germany is cleaning. And you really have to weigh the cost benefits of your system. Because I'm a bit disappointed Jerm isn't on here, because I interviewed a couple of gentlemen from South Africa. One of them, Ernst Roots, and from Pretoria, and the other, Joost Stradum from Orania.
We've had them both on our show, on this show as well, yeah.
Right. So one of the things Joost said about the way they organize labor in Orania, they have a term for it. It's called own labor. So there, it's very common to have, in South Africa generally, it's very common to have non-whites as home workers, and and maids, and that's a bit less common in Western European countries. And in the US, we definitely have a lot of cleaning services that are majority Hispanic. But you need to think about, there's the short-term benefit to you. He put it this way. He said, it privatizes the profits and collectivizes the costs.
But that's true of the whole thing. That's why I talked about the social housing, because, you know, again, from London, I know, even though I don't live in London, but all the Filipinos who work in care, for example, who look after old people, they all live in subsidized flats. So that money has to come from somewhere. It's literally the collectivity subsidizing, in this case, people who, who hire Filipinos or whatever.
Definitely. It also creates that it creates that dynamic of the haves and the have-nots, and so it's again, we're going back to those graphs that I showed you earlier, where the lowest wage earners, their wages are depressed even further, and then highest wage earners, it goes up and up and up. And so when you have this is one of the leading predictive factors of civil war, for example, is income inequality. And so that is a major contributing factor to social unrest. So you've got income inequality, you have different factions within your society with different belief systems, and then there's a loss of public trust. This is something that I don't know if you're familiar with David Betts. He's a professor of war at King's College London. John, you're probably familiar with him. But he's been talking about this since at least 2023. That was the first time that I came across him. But he's saying, look, we have we have all the recipe for an insurgency, and I don't like the fact that this is happening. But I guess I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here. But
an insurgency. You're saying that there is a potential for major social conflict.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
So this is different from the slide you've got up now, which I've been reading while you were talking. But again, if he said that, I didn't know about this. What's he called, David? What?
Oh, David Betts, Professor David Betts. He's a
Okay.
professor in the War Department at King's College London.
I have seen people writing about the potential for that in Britain. In France, it's something that has been talked, where I live, it's been talked about now for at least a decade, and famously was talked about, it was over 5 years ago when Emmanuel Macron's first interior minister resigned. Let's say this was 5 years ago. I've forgotten the exact date, but it was quite a long time ago. He resigned, and he publicly, as he was handing over the keys to his ministry to his successor, who, by the way, was then the prime minister, because the prime minister took over the interior ministry, he said, "We are on the brink of a civil war," and that was 5 years ago.
I remember.
Right.
I remember.
Gérard Collomb, who is a figure of the left. He is absolutely not. This man is a socialist. He was a mayor of Lyon and things like that. Absolutely not a right-wing rabble rouser or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's something that's recognized across the political spectrum. And we've said this before. The remigration is not a right versus left issue. The right are the ones talking about it right now, but it should be a concern across the political spectrum. A lot of my
it used to come from the left. It used to come from the left. Okay, well, what was the fruit workers in California in the 1960s and 70s?
Cesar Chavez.
Yeah, I mean, he was saying, build a wall, build a wall. Right. It came from the left.
Right, right. I've been going on. Actually, this is as recent as Bernie Sanders. This was one of his talking points. Yep. He wanted to close the border. And a lot of my talking points right here about labor were talking points of the left. Actually, West Virginia is a very interesting case of this. West Virginia used to be a solidly blue Democrat state. Now, and that's because of the mining industry here. They represented the workers, the working class. And then as the Democratic Party shifted away from protecting the working class, West Virginia turned into a solidly red state because they weren't defended anymore. In fact, the Democrats were the ones who were importing, we would call them scabs. So it's really, this should be a left and right, this should be a universal issue.
Well, that's what your first graph showed, the one showing GDP rising and wages flatlining. So this is a good slide here now about unemployment. That's a very good point. Very interesting figures you've got there.
Oh, right, yes.
Among immigrants. Very, very interesting, because, of course, that does indeed explode myth number 2. Which is that those jobs won't get done. Go ahead, Cyan.
That's right. They're coming in to do jobs Americans just won't do. Well, they're not doing them either. 34% of illegal immigrants of working age here in the United States are not in the labor market. And this holds true in other countries too. Here we go in Austria, 30% of the 15 to 64-year-old foreign nationals, they're also not engaged in the labor market. In Britain, there are 1.7 million working age non-UK citizens who are unemployed. They're living off of welfare. Not including foreign students, the native British taxpayers spent more than £23.8 billion on economically inactive migrants since 2020. This is equivalent to 30% of the UK's 2024 £61 billion budget deficit. So when you're looking at
that the budget deficit has now doubled since that figure, but anyway,
because they keep coming in.
yeah.
Oh, you made an interesting point earlier, that I wanted to piggyback off of. Actually, we're going to get to it a little bit later in the slides too, but you said that there were all of these resources that were diverted to paying hotels to put up migrants. I believe the budget for that is £4 billion.
Probably
that £4 billion could be rediverted somewhere else. In fact, it could be rediverted to those beds could be used for people who are
I mean, that's
out of the country.
absolutely scandalous. It's because the people who are receiving, at least indirectly, this 4 billion. Those are the illegal migrants. Those are the people in the dinghies. All right. But your presentation is concentrated on the much, much bigger issue of immigration generally. Because
right, because it's not just illegal immigration.
Exactly. If we take the British case, I repeat, annual immigration into Britain is now running at over 1 million a year. All right. Even if you have 1,000 people arriving a day, that still only translates into a few 100,000. All right. Okay, that's quite a lot of people,
Right.
but it's a fraction of the overall issue, and you're concentrating here in your figures on the overall question of immigration.
That's right. Yeah, because a common refrain that we hear is, oh, immigration is fine as long as they came here, but they need to come here legally. That's not the case anymore. And in fact, it hasn't been the case for years. And not once in the United States have we voted for more immigration. Every time that we're asked, we request lesser immigration, or, in the best case scenario, for it to stay the same. And so this is really something that's been forced upon us, and we need to begin objecting. And again, it's not racist to do that. It will improve your life materially and socially and culturally. In this one here, the title said, "The crops will rot in the fields," because that's what you hear all the time. The picture here on the right is of Hispanic laborers who are harvesting Vidalia onions. This is a this is a prized crop in Eastern Washington. And there's a story out of 1998. We had the famous Vidalia onion raids. So ICE agents raided several farms, and they were rounding up the illegal workers who were harvesting these highly prized onions. But it only took 2 days for 4 congressmen to complain to Congress about and the Immigration Service about the lack of regard for farmers. So these legislators believe that the Immigration and Naturalization Service, quote, does not understand the needs of America's farmers. So our managing editor, James Fulford, he wrote about this at the time of the incident. And one of the things he said is, look, America's farmers need to be paying higher wages so they can hire Americans. They also need to, speaking of needs for American farmers, they need to mechanize their operations. Luckily today, we have a lot of options for that. We have pickers for tomatoes, we have pickers for lettuce, we have pickers for strawberries. We have machines that can place the seeds exactly where they need to be in the dirt. So a lot of this stuff does not need to be done by hands anymore. And frankly, he said, some of them need to be fined or jailed. In America, we have something called RICO Act, which prosecutes enterprise crimes. So this is where your profit structure is dependent on the illegal activities. So in the case of some of these farming operations, if their profit structure is dependent on illegal immigration, then that is an illegal activity. So again, immigration privatizes the profits and collectivizes the costs. But where does this leave American farmers? So in this slide here, on the left, we have an image of a robot milker. We have these incredible milkers now that they can sense the teats with infrared. And so the cows can just walk in and get milked whenever they feel like it. You don't have to have labor there at certain times of day to do it manually. It requires very little guidance and upkeep. Now, the trouble for farmers when they want to adopt this kind of mechanization is that they're struggling because when you're the first farm to get some of this technology, of course, at first it's very expensive before it's mass produced. So I have a friend out of Washington. Her farm was the first to get a mechanized milking machine back in Washington, and this was incredible for them. But they are extremely costly. So it means that a lot of these family farms can't keep up with the larger corporate farms. This is something that is probably that's relevant to you. When I spent some time in the Netherlands, there are a lot of family farms, and I know that this is a huge topic of contention over there. Is you have these family farmers who say, look, due to these regulations, I can no longer afford to keep operating this family farm the way my family's done it for generations. And so one of the things we need to do as a society is we need to start providing incentives, grants. We already have incentives for solar power, electric cars, all of these things that help the environment. Guys, the biggest environmental impact it's not cow farts, it's not methane, it's mass migration. In fact, in the United States, the Sierra Club used to write about this, but they were paid $1 million to shut up about it. Luckily,
but isn't there a more broader agenda here of just destroying indigenous farming altogether? It seems to be that seems to be the motif in the West. I mean, you come across, and depending on what media you watch, I mean, I see it. I see clips. I don't watch Fox News, but I see clips of it of farmers are going out of business. Trump betrayed him. It's very for me it's kind of trivialized because it doesn't talk about the broader agenda here, and that is to get. I mean, the Netherlands is the best example. A few years ago, I mean, it was just outrageous. I mean, again, going to kind of the cultural, social thing. I mean, farming is very, very important to the identity of so many countries. I mean, I've talked to Austrians, the sanctions on Russia. Well, a great deal of Austria's agricultural goods were sent to Russia, and people like them a lot. Okay, a lot. And then we here get screwed, and the Austrians get screwed, and they're furious about it because a lot of people don't know that Austria is a really important agricultural country. Not to speak of like Hungary, for example. But there is this. The EU doesn't like farmers. It just doesn't like them. And there's no political will in the United States to protect private farming. It's agribusiness.
That's right. Well, it's part of the whole program of cultural and social dislocation, isn't it?
Yes.
We started off by talking about that at the beginning of the show. I didn't have a chance to say, but I'm sure you know this, Cyan, there's a fellow called Peter Sutherland. I've forgotten exactly what his function was, but he's a sort of big World Economic Forum type person. And in a hearing in the House of Lords at least 20 years ago, he said that migration was desirable because it would make societies less homogenous, and that was a good thing. And obviously the attack on farming that Peter has described is part of that, because farming embodies rootedness. It obviously works on the land by definition. In other words, in a certain place, it's the somewheres, not the anywheres. And also, as we know, farming is very typically a family business handed down through generations. And that's obviously part of the national fabric, which the whole migration ideology seeks to destroy. Anyway, let's move on with your myths, Cyan, because otherwise we're not going to have enough time to get through Right. We're only on myth 2 now, and I think you've got 5.
We'll rush through it. No, you're right. But it's one more point about food. Food is incredibly important because the ability to produce your own food is one of the things that ensures national sovereignty. Yes. So, back to Peter's point, look, if anybody had an agenda to promote globalism over nationalism, the first thing that they would attack is food production and family farms. And I think that you're absolutely right. That's what we're seeing. Again, John, it just reminded me of, I was just looking up one of our articles that we wrote about it at the time. Keir Starmer went after British farmers by imposing an inheritance tax on the family farms. Correct. And this was an absolute disaster at the time. Only 54% of the food that's produced that Britons eat is produced there in Britain.
But that's been the case. That's been the case for nearly 200 years. This all goes back to the mid-19th century argument over the Corn Laws in the 1860s, and Britain ever since then has indeed imported most of its food. So that's not directly connected to the question of migration.
Right. I mean, it's simply it's an ongoing effect of it. But again, it's directly in violation of the interests of the people, because the vast majority, is something like 85 to 91% of Britons want food sovereignty, and that that is the number one that you need to eat. You need to put food on the table. So speaking of food, we have I put Velveeta cheese. I don't think they have this in your country. It's probably illegal. But we have something called American cheese. And it was developed because it's the result of a bailout of the American dairy industry. So what we, during the Second World War, we had all of this milk that was basically, it was going to go bad, and the government purchased this from the dairy farmers in order to keep this in business. And they said, well, what do we need to do to keep it, to preserve it, because we don't want to lose it. So the government came up with a way to preserve it, and they stored it in cheese caves, and then they rationed it out. And so this is where the term government cheese comes from. And people liked it so much that they produce it today under the brand name Velveeta. But it's basically plastic. But anyway, my point is,
I grew up on it. Okay, so
right, it's good. We're probably nuclear by now, but the government has been creative in the past. It can do so again.
I think that's where we got mac and cheese. Okay, yeah,
it's great,
macaroni and cheese, because that's what Velveeta is best for that. Okay.
Yes, nachos, really good. So here we go. Myth number 3, we need immigrants to prop up these social services. This is a really common argument. They say, well, okay, we need, particularly in the US, we talk about it with Social Security. Well, we need more immigrants generally to work, because we have this baby boomer generation that is getting older. We still need to pay out these social services. But no, it is not the case. They are, in fact, a tax burden. In Sweden, a 2017 government investigation found that immigrants will double the state cost of pensions, even after taking into consideration the taxes that are paid by these immigrants. This was duplicated again in 2019. This paper found that immigrants were not compensating for the aging population that we're so concerned about, and instead they drew those more benefits than would otherwise be paid out. In the Netherlands, a Dutch study by your own CPO showed that an immigrant who arrives at 25 will have a net negative lifetime cost of 43,000 euros. An immigrant-descended child born in the Netherlands will have a net negative lifetime cost of even more, just under 100,000 euros. So this is not sustainable. And on top of that, the ethnicity of your migrants matters. In 2019, the Danish Ministry of Finance discovered non-Western immigration cost 33 billion kroners annually. This is translated to about 4.4 billion euros. Again, in a Dutch paper that I believe was sponsored by you guys, the Borderless Welfare State, the Consequences of Immigration for Public Finances. Your researchers discovered that non-Western immigration costs 17 billion euros annually, and the same study revealed that 81.4% of the national debt could be attributed to spending on immigrants. This is appalling. Myth number 4. Well, so, okay, the conclusion here is we can't afford to have these immigrants here, but remigrating them would be too expensive, therefore we can't do it. That's false. Western economies can't afford not to initiate remigration policies. We can't, we need to do something now. The cost of that is actually less than keeping them here. So one thing that's been a bit contentious. So this was in the news on May 5th. Our Department of Homeland Security offered $1,000 for illegal immigrants to self-deport. They developed this fantastic app where you can submit your intent to deport. And once you have deported yourself, you can get reimbursement for your plane tickets and some reasonable moving expenses. So This is a huge savings. Altogether, with the cost of flights, the self-deportation costs $4,500, but it costs about a little over $17,000 in enforcement per illegal deported. So a lot of people said, you're not going to get people to self-deport. That's absolutely false. It turns out, so since Trump's inauguration, the Center for Immigration Studies found that 2.2 million illegals have deported themselves, and about half of those were voluntary. Deported themselves, meaning 2.2 million have left, and about half of those are voluntary. So actually, this worked, and it's been incredible. We would like to take it further at the Institute. We've come up with two platforms, one for the United States, one for the UK, and of course, a number of other suggestions for other countries. We do have some for the Netherlands as well. But here we have, just to produce an example, we would propose voluntary remigration payments of $72,000. This represents about 150% of the median American income, or this is 12 years earning in Mexico, 3.5 in Japan, 33 years in Ghana. So the total cost of this program, again, this is a program for people who are here legally but would like to leave, and they need the means to do so. The total cost would be $3.6 trillion over the span of 12 years. That sounds astronomical, but when you look at the savings, we are saving $898 million per year. This is 3 times the annual cost of the repatriation policy platform. Where does that savings come from? We have a little over $50 billion in housing assistance to these non-Western families. This is 75.6% of the total budget.
This is for the U.S., correct?
This is for the U.S. Yeah, we have one for the U.S. and also one for the U.K. But just a brief illustration. So we've got $50 billion in housing assistance, $100 billion in nutrition assistance. They make up 60% of the total budget. $527 billion in Medicaid, $125 billion prisons, policing, and incarceration. They make up 69% of the total budget. We also have a bonus here that $80 billion goes to educating the children of illegal aliens in our country. And if we loop in Puerto Rico, we can save another $14.4 billion. So these savings are massive. We have to acknowledge the differences in social services between the native-born population and the non-Western population. In Britain, we would recommend a one-time payment of £65,000. So this figure is slightly less than double the median annual earnings in the UK. It represents 40 years earnings in India, 10 years in the Caribbean, 50 to 80 years earnings, and depending on which African state you wish to relocate to. And again, people say, well, we shouldn't be paying them to leave. Well, you know what? There are a lot of people who would do so voluntarily, happily, and will go start businesses in those countries and then encourage other people to come with them. So this is a humane legal option, and it has incredible savings for our countries. In the UK, the cost of these payments we approximate to be 118.6 billion over 12 years. It's about a little over 9 billion pounds per year. But here are some of the savings. In policing and incarceration, here we're comparing the UK who has a very diverse population with Poland, which is a very homogeneous population. They're 98.8% Polish. They have similar populations. So in the UK in 2022, the UK spent 17 billion on policing, whereas Poland spent 2.4 billion pounds on policing. This is not due to a difference in the pay structure for police. The average officer in Poland makes about 21,000 pounds a year, whereas the constable in the UK makes 23.
I think you need to change your figures on the British population on that graph, Cyan. The population of the United Kingdom is not 56 million; it's nearer 70 million.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Thank you. So you're,
but anyway,
and you're increasing every year.
I get, obviously, we get the general point, but Poland is, well, not quite half the size. It's a little bit more than half the size in terms of population of Britain. Britain has a very, very big population.
Oh, right. So we were controlling
for Poland is 40 million. Britain is nearly double that. It's 70 now, Britain.
Oh, thank you. No, I realize.
But anyway, I get the point. Obviously, the spending you're making the point.
By scale, the argument is
yeah. Of course, yeah. Even with the absolutely, even in terms of scale, even in absolute, but even in absolute terms, you can, even if you were to rejig the figures, as I say, that you would still, of course, we very much get your point.
No, I appreciate that too. So there's a lot of numbers here. So any extra set of eyeballs is very much appreciated.
Yeah.
But again, we're seeing that the prison population again makes up a large part of that national budget, and the non-British population costs something like 1.2 billion pounds annually.
Yeah.
So here we go. And then to round out our savings, you would also save the National Health Service would save 52.35 billion pounds. In 2021, the NHS spent over £4,000 per person as part of the total budget. Ethnically non-British persons make up about 18 to 20% of the UK population. So it currently spend 4.3 billion pounds to support illegal immigrant and refugee arrivals. So you would be saving that as an additional bonus. Overall, so paid remigration would cost the UK almost 10 billion pounds, but by removing the segment of the population, again, legally and voluntarily, the UK would save 72.55 billion pounds per year. It's a huge net gain. You could wipe out the national deficit even with a paid remigration program. So this is truly incredible. And people will take you up on this. The other myth is that migrants don't want to leave. In fact, a remarkably large number of ethnic minorities in our Western nations express the desire to go back to their homelands, and they do so if they have the opportunity. This figure, 66%, comes from a marketing agency. It's Word on the Curb. They found that 66% of non-British ethnic minority people in the UK age 16 to 34, young people were actively planning or considering leaving the UK. And less than 20% of those who wanted to leave cited racial discrimination. So it was really not that bad. They're not leaving for racial reasons. In fact, a lot of them want to leave for the same reasons that we're citing. There's lack of housing here. We don't have opportunity. Well, with a repatriation payment of 30 years of a life in Ghana, you could happily start a business and retire. I did think this was funny. 39% stated that Britain suffered from bad vibes. So they've got to get away from those bad vibes.
I always thought it was the bad food, but okay.
Oh, you don't like beans on toast? This couple, this is Tony and Ayo. They run a YouTube channel and a website called Expat Life Ghana. And it's really fascinating, interesting. They're a couple that relocated from Texas to Ghana, and they have their family there, and they chronicle what life is like. And one of the things that Tony stated is, he said, look, in America, in Texas, I was a black man. In Ghana, I'm just a man. And a lot of people would feel the same way. They're just excited to go back to a place where they feel like they belong, and there is a lot of economic opportunity there if you make it. And of course, with a paid repatriation plan, there's endless opportunity. We found that Monmouth University found that 45% of people of color in the U.S. would move abroad if free to do so. This increases the younger you get. So it goes up to 51% among people aged 18 to 34. 30% of African Americans who visit Africa have either relocated or they wish to do so permanently. And Ghana, a lot of these countries also have reciprocal benefits for the people who are returning. So Ghana passed a right of abode law for the global African diaspora in the hope of luring them back to start businesses. And Senegal has very similar return policies. Liberia has a citizenship law, which is specifically designed to court Blacks from all over the world.
Yeah, that's
the Asians, so I know we're running out of time here, so I'm just going to breeze through it, but 26-30% of Asians would consider relocating to their ancestral homelands. Only 45% of Asians consider themselves to be in any way American, and 51% claim to be friends with only members of their own race. So they are very insular. They maintain that identity, and they would like to go back if given the opportunity. In Austria, 26% of immigrants feel like they do not belong. Among immigrants who've been in the country for less than 5 years, 46% feel like they don't belong. So they would gladly remigrate if given the opportunity to do so. You know, again, we're not just kicking people out. We're giving people an economic opportunity back in their homelands. And the bonus myth is it's too late. That's false, but if we don't act now, it will be. I think for you in the Netherlands, your migrant population is still first or second generation. There is still time. And the third generation immigrants, most of the intermarriage is actually really uncommon in the Netherlands, despite what the media may portray. So a lot of them have immigrant parents and would relocate with their parents if given the opportunity to do so. You know, with you guys, visa cancellation or review of dual citizenship would increase the Dutch share of the population by 12.5 points. So you could be a 0.5% Dutch again. And this is a winning issue, as you're seeing. You have it in your platform for the elections. I believe their elections are next month. Is that right?
Yeah, 29th of October in the Netherlands. Yeah.
There we go. You know, in the UK, we have the Homeland Party has remigration in their platform. In Norway, the Norwegian Democrats, I just gave a presentation there, they have remigration is a core part of their program. In the US, this the general population wants this. You know, 63% of young Republican men were willing to tell the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that they view the demographic changes as deliberate process to replace us. They don't want that. You know, 40% of Americans in general think that the Great Replacement poses a threat to whites and white culture. And
well, I'd like to point out that the Great Replacement theory came from the left, came from Democrats in the 1980s. Okay, everyone says Tucker Carlson came up with it, but it was part of Democratic Party politics in the 1980s and the 1990s. Again, another myth dispelled.
Was it not Renaud Camus? And then he was first, right? And then that came over?
I thought Renaud Camus was the person who invented the phrase, yes. Much more recently, yeah.
Yes, but perhaps you're right, yeah.
It was part of Democratic politics in the United States in the 80s and the 90s, okay? And then it was Donald Trump invented it. No, he didn't. It came from the left.
Or the left was the first to make it a political issue. You're exactly right. That the American workers are being replaced. You know,
and then it was tweaked. Then it went into the cultural realm, where you know people of bad faith saying, you know, this is a racist issue. No, it was a worker issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. That's right. So yeah, most people want less immigration and they're ready for remigration. They just need to see that it is a practical policy. So this is my last slide. The final point, closing point that I want to make here is that migration and immigration was a deliberate political process that was enforced upon us. And it can be a deliberate, legal, and peaceful process to reverse that. But it's up to us in order to do that. So thanks for allowing me to give this presentation.
Cyan,
Again, I had a
we'll
really,
wrap up now,
really
and that was a
time.
very wonderful presentation, extremely well researched. We've flashed
next
up.
time, John,
yeah.
I want to have her back, and I want to do 2 hours because I have so many questions. But it was an excellent presentation.
Well, if Cyan agrees, we'd be happy to have her back. As a matter of fact, we had a British author, Simon Elmer, who has written a book called The Great Replacement. We had him on only a few weeks ago. So, Cyan, if you're up for it, we'd be very happy to have you back.
Well, thank you.
You've provided us with masses of data. To sum up, have been struck by two: one at the beginning, one at the end. Your first graph, which really I think says it all, the flatlining of the median wage and the great increase in per capita GDP, and then at the end, which we didn't develop, and maybe we should have you back to discuss this, the correlation, or at least apparent correlation, between immigration and debt, which you showed for the UK, but which applies, of course, also to France, where I'm speaking to you from. France, the French government collapsed yesterday. France is incapable of bringing its state spending under control. We don't know what's going to happen next. There's a new prime minister, but he will probably fail as well. And of course, immigration is high. It's very, very high in Britain, but it's high in all these countries. And the notion that immigration is a driver of debt, is a driver of deficits and debt, is extremely interesting. And the facts, at least on the surface, appear to bear that out, certainly if you take the British case, because immigration went through the roof under Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, reaching well over 1 million a year. And that's exactly the time when the deficit, and of course, therefore, the debt went from the £60 million a year that you quoted, Cyan, to something more like 150 billion now. So that's a very, very interesting subject, and I think we should return to it. Cyan Quinn from West Virginia, from the White Papers Institute in West Virginia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we look forward to having you on the show again. Thank you very much, Cyan. All the best. Thank you to our viewers. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye.